watching a Smart Men's Business. I'm on over region and definitely heading into matters of debt management and sustainability. And of course, given the current debt ranging at 97 trillion, and that is according to the recent Auditor General's report. And of course, more borrowing seems to be still undergoing for the country in terms of developing the various, economic related infrastructure, the capital infrastructure, and so many perspectives into that. And now that is accompanied with the report where Uganda's debt has risen by 3.8 trillion as the shilling depreciates at the same time. Of course, recently, whereby it has depreciated at a rate of about 4% in the past 2 weeks. And of course, with worries of it reaching about 4,000. Well, but let's hope it won't get that way. And also that comes in line where Uganda still plans to borrow 13 trillion to cover the budget deficit gap when it comes to 2024-2025 financial year. But of course, in line with that, in breaking down these matters, I'm joined by Christian Birinjiro. He is the Programs Officer, Uganda Debt Network. Christian, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, our viewers, and good to be here.
Well, very amazing. Now we are looking at the current situation. We are debt management. We are planning this, planning that. And recently we had Professor Sachs, who has been in the country. He's still in the country, yet to meet the president, talking about that where we are. We actually even need to borrow more money, long-term loans, and he emphasizing that part of these loans can actually be invested in human capital development, talking about education, and all that. So, but before we get there, that was just to let the viewers know and see what we shall give an opinion regarding his theory for Uganda. But the way you're looking at things, don't you think the situation is getting out of hand for the country in terms of dates?
Thank you very much, Andrew. And yes, we are. It definitely takes a sane person. I'm not imputing anything to see and know that our debt as a country is taking on a dangerous trend. Yeah. The rate at which our debt is growing is really concerning. And I will quote, at least I know that for a fact, our debt has just in the past 5 years risen by 107%.
107%.
Yes, and on the other hand, the GDP over the same period has risen by only 39%. So that ideally means you're borrowing, but we don't see where the money is going if it is not contributing to your GDP. And so that is why we are concerned. But then again, we are also concerned that government is not being honest. This is a discussion we have always had with government. We always disagree, of course, on the computation of debt, how we are computing debt. You are talking about 97 trillion, but that is the actual debt that we owe is over and above that. Because that computation that government is giving us does not, for instance, include domestic arrears.
Okay.
If you were to add the 10.8 trillion in domestic arrears, because that is a debt, is it not?
It is definitely a debt. Exactly.
So we see our debt has really grown. It is encroaching on service delivery, and as a matter of fact, we know that in the coming financial year, 24-25, as always, debt is going to continue taking the bigger share of the national budget. Actually, while the debt continues to increase with the subsequent budgets, we see now the discretionary resource reduce over time. Because according to the second budget call circular that was released by the Ministry of Finance on 19th of February, the discretionary resource is going to reduce from 25 trillion this financial year that we are running to 21 trillion. That is, it's reducing by about 3.4 trillion. Now, Andrew, that discretionary resource is what Parliament has the leeway to pick and allocate. And say, human capital, I've given you this, infrastructure, take this,
education, health.
Yes, so the other part of the budget, which is non-discretionary or committed, in other words, it is committed to pay your obligations. You've already, if I should use the word, you've already eaten it or used it up. Yeah. So it is basically committed for debt payments. And so we see that increasing from 27 trillion this financial year running, and it's going to go to about 32 trillion the coming, in the coming financial year.
We're having about 60% of the budget getting to almost.
Almost.
It's about 50% to clear dates.
Thereabouts. And then you expect URA maybe to raise about 29 trillion, make it 30, about that, but 32% of that is going to debt servicing.
And URA had a deficit. There was a deficit in January in terms of tax revenues against the expected.
Exactly. And so those are our concerns. Any citizen would worry because as it is, maybe after the census, we shall know how many we are now, and then we redistribute the debt obligation. But as we stand, you are supposed to pay around 2.5 million.
Each Ugandan.
Including your children and, So that is not, I think that should worry us. That should worry us. And that should show government that we need to be more frugal with the resources that we borrow.
Well, interesting. Recently we had the NAM summit, the G77 here in Kampala, and part of the key discussions were in line with reforms in loan distribution, most especially from the Bretton Woods to the developing countries. And now the question comes in that. Is it right for us, do you think that was the right perspective in terms of the careless borrowers, we are telling the people to on terms on which we should borrow their money? Do you think it was right, or it can change something?
Of course, no serious creditor will take you serious. You can't come to me to borrow. And you're dictating the terms at which you want to borrow. To me. And actually that reminds me for this financial year budget running, the finance ministry of course has told us that the resource envelope has been 52.7 trillion.
52. Exactly.
Which is of course not true, because you remember in December we had that 3.5 trillion that was added as a supplementary.
I remember.
Of course, to cater for NAM, like you said, NAM, census, among others. And so that is where we see government not being honest. There are quite a number of areas where, and I will recommend that government comes out and is honest and transparent to the citizens. But going back to the dictating of the terms on which you should borrow, ideally government cannot do that.
So that
because because one, our creditworthiness is deteriorating.
Absolutely.
Of course. So when you go to borrow, there are quite some implications. And that will make your borrowing expensive. But also we see that because of that, government has now started coming to compete with its babies, or the private sector, because again, in this coming financial year budget, we see, while government says now we want to check our domestic borrowing, we want to reduce it, but we see the action speaking otherwise, because domestic borrowing will increase from 3 trillion to 4 trillion. And so why do you come then to borrow more from the domestic market if you think you can go out and borrow on those terms? But again, because it is getting harder for us to get concessional loans, which are ideally cheaper and desirable, like you said, and which I believe that Professor Sachs was trying to direct us that way. We have, however, we are more inclined to borrowing at concessional terms, which is quite more expensive, especially the commercial loans. You know, before 2016, we did not have commercial loans as a country. Most of our loans were from the multilateral agencies. And those are desirable because they are long-term. They have a grant element, about 35 and above. And so you can, try to use them to develop yourself, to develop your human capital and etc. But when you begin moving away from your multilateral lenders and going more towards the commercial, then there is a problem because the commercial loans are usually shorter term and usually more expensive. They hardly have the grant element, and so you either borrow to invest or you borrow and then you're finished. So
very interesting. You know, you mentioned something there of borrowing 3 trillion from the from the commercial banks. 3 trillion now increasing to 4 trillion from the to the domestic bank, and that might seem like it's crowding out the private sector. But then you're looking at IMF loan with stringent measures. Even the new, whom we call the modern day colonialists, Russia and China, theirs have the toughest strings attached. So how do you advise government to create a balance? Because probably the domestic debt, however much it's crowding out the private sector, but at least it's known to, because I believe the biggest percentage, that's why we are amounting to 97 trillion, is due from the loans we've been obtaining from Bretton Woods institutions. That's the World Bank and the IMF. So how are we creating that balance? Yet we need to borrow, but...
Now, you see, I think personally, I wouldn't have a problem with borrowing because we always say at UDN at least, we believe that we believe in responsible borrowing. Borrow, but be responsible with the resources you're borrowing. So whether it is the Bretton Woods, whether it is China, whether it's commercial, I think the creditor largely has no problem. I give you a loan. It is up to you to use it.
To use it the way you feel.
Productively, or you ruin yourself with it. And so it is about us generating these loans and then use them responsibly. At least I always, there's this report by the World Bank, which I always like referring to, about $1 invested in Uganda generating about 7/10, which is less than $1.
Less than $1.
Yes, worth of infrastructure development in Uganda. But elsewhere in the US, the same dollar invested generates about $6 worth. And so where is the problem? How are you utilizing your debt? But again, you're saying that domestic borrowing is better. It's actually worse. It's actually worse because when you look at the Auditor General's report that has been recently released, domestic borrowing over the last 5 years has grown way too much compared to external borrowing. And so we should be even more worried about domestic loans, domestic borrowing. Because in 2019, our domestic loans were about 31 trillion.
31 trillion?
No, about 15 trillion, sorry.
Just domestic?
15 domestic loans. But as we speak, as of last year, it is 42. So from 15 to 42 in just a space of 5 years. Now that is worrying.
But then, I feel, you see, currently, China has been undertaking what we call the Road Belt Initiative, and countries have taken over into that. Don't you think sometimes we embracing these, being part of these projects, because now already Kenya, under the standard gauge railway, is already grappling with, maintenance costs and all that, and you find that currently the Kenyan shilling is actually depreciating. There is a lot of data and all this. Don't you think sometimes we undertaking these infrastructure developments, is also costing us in terms of maintenance fees and costs, and we are forced to borrow more money and the debt increases?
Yeah, ideally it is about prior planning, and some of these loans you actually plan before you have acquired it.
Yeah.
At least we know the Ministry of Finance tells us they do plan ahead. That is why some of the loans now in the new public debt and other financial liabilities management framework,
Yeah.
there are some projects that are going to be dropped because they are not performing. There are those that are going to be degraded. And so
I thought they should base on their value in future once they are implemented.
No, but
right?
if you have acquired a loan and the project is not performing, you cannot continue to pay. Maybe you're paying interest, you're incurring charges.
They try to find out why the project is not performing?
Yes, by the time ideally they come up with these resolutions, you want to believe that they have done these assessments
checks
and they have analyzed and they see it is not worth the value that the country is getting from such projects running. Is probably not worth continuing with such a project. And so ideally we emphasize planning before we can even enter into some of these agreements or to get loans, acquire loans to finance some of these projects. But again, that being said, we want to caution government. When you look at the second budget call circular, again, there are quite a number of promises we see in there. But we want government to come out and be honest, and rethink, because specifically for the domestic areas, because of the impact that they have on the economy, we want government to rethink. You cannot have a bill of over 10 trillion in domestic areas, and you're reducing the budget for clearing these areas. It's actually reducing from 215 billion to 200 billion.
200 billion.
And yet the ministry came up with a strategy to clear these areas sometime in 2021. And they gave all reasons why we do not have to have a big bill for domestic areas. Which includes, of course, the crowding out of the private sector. Though we see that is continuing to happen, which includes compromising our credibility as a country to pay back our debts, and the investors are looking. As you're failing to pay your domestic areas, the investors are looking, and they know if I go and invest in such a place, this is probably what will happen. The donors are looking, and the creditors are also looking. And so as you go out there to acquire loans, of course, the interest will be high. You'll have higher insurance premiums on your loans that you want to acquire. And so we call upon government. Not only is it affecting the economy, because it is going to be hard for the private sector to access credit. It's going to be harder for them to pay taxes so that you can generate your revenues. And so sometimes you're throwing them out of business. You're throwing them out of business. You're making them lose jobs, They cannot access maybe health services because sometimes they have to access them themselves because the budget for human capital development is dwindling. And so there are all these challenges. Actually, the ministry also told in their strategy, of course, they also alluded to the fact that these businesses will now charge higher fees.
Yes.
Or they'll supply at higher prices to government because they know it's going to take long. Either way to pay them. So they want to kind of shield and hedge themselves against such eventualities. And so you find the debt becoming even more expensive. Yeah, and so that is why we want government to be honest, sit on the table, and try to tease out, do we really need this as opposed to this? Yeah.
All right, so very interesting with Christine Birinjiro. She's the programs officer. That is the Uganda Debt Network, and we are discussing matters to do with the debt sustainability, and of course with the worrying debt, grappling all the time as we proceed with this economy, whereby each individual 2.5 million, and like she said, this is money that even our great grandchildren will actually pay in terms of that. And what will happen in case this trend continues the way it's happening? Of course, more of these discussions are going to be coming up shortly after this break. Stick around.
Smart 24, driving business.
Osmosis is coming.
Osmosis, what's the money? When do you see him? Send him to Momo.
My bossy, can I borrow fuero? Biggie money, can I borrow renty? Manager, give me some caloni. Okay, what about 5K?
When you need a loan, you've got MTN Momo. Wesotinge. Use the Momo app or dial *165*5# for all quick loans. Choose from the different loan options from our partners and get one that works for you. Together, we're unstoppable.
The cavalry has arrived. Fall out! This is Alpha Team. We are in position and we are go for extraction.
Max Verstappen takes the lead.
Carry a world of entertainment with you wherever you go with DSTV Stream.
Welcome to a world where homes tell stories and properties more than just structures. Properties 360 unlocks the doors to your next adventure in real estate. We go beyond the curb appeal to explore the heart and soul of every property. We are diving into the latest materials, exploring cutting-edge technologies, and witnessing the birth of architectural marvels. From cozy starter homes to luxurious estates, we are giving you an all-access pass to the most stunning properties on the market. Meet the visionaries behind these spaces, hear stories of families finding their dream homes, and get insider tips from the pros. Properties 360, where homes come alive.
Don't miss on Smart 24 TV.
Smart 24, driving business.
We'll be back from the break. It's 9:29. Smart means business. Andrew Barije, my guest this morning, Christine Bienjiro, programs manager. That's the Uganda Debt Network. Well, of course, before we proceed, still to remind you, Smart 24 TV, that's on GOTV, channel 320, and the DSTV channel 372. You can reach us out on our social media handles at Smart 24 TV, that's on Twitter or X, and Smart 24 TV Official, that's on Facebook. And when you're there, you can engage in the different discussions that we normally upload there. Participate, give your opinion in relation to what challenges you go through as a citizen living in Uganda financially most of the time. And well, for those of you that are obsessed with the gadgets, you go to your Google Play Store. We have the Smart Digital application, and the beauty about this application is that when you have this, you will be able to stream Smart 24 TV and Smart FM, NBS Radio, and so many more. And Smart 24 TV, that's our official website where you can get the latest updated business research facts. The university student in a business institute, well, that's the home for you to participate. And Smart 24 TV live on YouTube, we are streaming live YouTube at any part of the world you're able to get this information. And the plot 42 Nile Avenue, that's the home of Smart 24 TV, where I am in the studio broadcasting live to you this business related information. Now, heading back into the debt sustainability of Uganda. Now, Kristen, you know, there is a question about infrastructure driving economic growth, thinking about basic infrastructure driving economic growth. And we've borrowed the money. I understand some has not been effectively utilized, but we can't rule out the fact that we have infrastructure that has been established, visible, you know, in most especially in upcountry. We go to Western Uganda, go to Eastern Uganda, you know, and so many more. We had a scenario way back in the 1970s, whereby we did have quite lots of tarmac roads, but businesses were happening. Are we seeing even the little money we've used to basic infrastructure, the little money we've borrowed to establish a few infrastructure, the basic ones? Maybe it's not driving economic growth, and it can explain why we don't see the return on investment.
Yeah, well, it is. I like how you refer to it as little. The little money we have borrowed. Exactly. Yeah. But if you will remember, about over 5 years ago, there's a time our budget was always dominated by infrastructure development. Remember? Yeah. The lion's share always went to infrastructure. And why we are not seeing
it driving economic growth,
is probably because we were borrowing on commercial terms and to finance the infrastructure. Okay. We were not probably mindful of the fact that if you want to borrow short-term loans, you must ensure that the projects, or the investment that you're putting this money to should be able to generate higher returns in such a short time.
In a shortest time.
Exactly. Okay. So if you make such choices, then probably that is why you will see this. And so as we borrowed for the infrastructure development, that is one of the things that even as we borrow for anything else, for any other projects, for any other maybe ventures or investments, what we must have at the back of our minds is what kind of loan am I borrowing for this kind of investment or venture? Because if you know you're going to borrow at commercial terms, like we saw, the loans that are more expensive, that are shorter term, and then you want to borrow and finance a project probably that is long term, then that is going to be a problem because the loan will mature much faster than the return when you have not even seen the return
yet
on where you put that loan. And so that kind of mismatch is what we want to avoid, is what you ideally want to avoid. And I think that is why the Ministry of Finance, though it has always pledged over about the last 4 years plus, they've always pledged that they are to reduce this kind of debt trajectory, or to get back in line. The ministry said, and they would always prioritize non-concessional loans for those projects strictly that have a very high return on investment. As opposed to the concessional, and they promise to keep borrowing on concessional terms. But again, what we see is different from what is on paper, because we've seen over time, at least from about 2013-14, concessional loans, or the loans from your multilateral creditors, have always, taken the lion's share of our public debt, from 87 trillion. But as time goes on, we see them reducing over time. So from 87 trillion of about 10 years ago to now 61 trillion.
61 trillion.
And it has been a steady reduction.
Okay.
There's nowhere we have seen, now we go back up, but it has steadily reduced.
The trend has been...
on the other hand, we see the commercial loans, growing from 2016, and now they have grown to about 14%.
And
about 14, yes. And so that should worry us. As the commercial loans grow, the ones which are expensive, we see the multilateral creditors reducing, and that is what we don't want, because that will continue to increase our debt. And so if the ministry is saying we want to prioritize concessional loans, we want to see that reflected on paper as well.
Papers.
Yeah, and that's probably what the Professor Sachs was alluding to, much as he seems controversial because he was encouraging the country to continue borrowing
money.
He probably does not know the
context of the country,
and the history of Uganda. But ideally, when he says continue to borrow loans that will take you about 40 years, that is basically concessional loans, and which is desirable. But you want to borrow on concessional terms and reduce the commercial loans. But he also probably does not know that in Uganda, our loans have, we acquire loans, but we don't see the value
of the loans,
the impact of.
But you see, Christian, in Zambia, just in the south here, is grappling with the debt. And this is money that was borrowed, but there was impact of this money, actually. When you go to Zambia today, you see the infrastructure is established, but debt is too much. So what is the guarantee we have that if we utilize this money, that we shall have a satisfaction on reducing the debt?
So the debt is ideally supposed to help you run your economy.
Yes.
Just like the US, they have a lot of debt, but they are not yet, distressed.
That is a little bit. It will bust out one day.
Yes, but ideally you want to look at how much are you using this debt to develop your economy? How much is the debt contributing to your revenue generation? Your local revenues.
Yeah.
And that is where we are going to assess whether the debt is becoming productive. Even when you produce and the debt is productive, it has been utilized properly. The test is not whether there are buildings, the roads are there. No, you'll borrow and then you construct those buildings, you'll construct the roads, but are they generating the return in terms of
revenues?
And so because you need to generate the revenues to be able to pay back the debt, but also to run your economy.
But are we yet there as a country, Uganda, to borrow and generate value, taking a look at the population of the unskilled, which is also massive? Because it calls for investment ideas and run. Because what is the purpose of you putting up a very nice road and no one is transporting his commodity? People are using it to go to town to shop and all that.
Yeah, ideally, because, and then again, it goes to the planning that we were talking about.
Yes.
If you have planned properly, then you're able to see that if I put, for example, an expressway in this area or in this place, then it should be able to generate me this revenue. It will maybe relieve this problem. These are the kinds of people that are going to use it for this and this purpose.
Exactly.
And again, that means as you're planning, your planning has to be inclusive. You do not come, for example, and plan for your people and you just throw a project there for them. So the planning has to be joint with the population so that you address the needs of the population. If I, a farmer, maybe I have a need. My problem might be market access. And then you come and you're giving me all these tools and, etc. You're giving me the seeds. And maybe that is not my problem. But if we were to sit down, you would realize that I need a better road network. To be able to. And so that is why we need to plan smart. Be inclusive as you're planning. Make sure you sit with the stakeholders. And so that is when you'll be able to address the needs of your population, but also that they will be productive. And then you get the revenues or the return that you expected or anticipated. That is smarter planning.
Smarter planning.
Yeah.
But now, for where Uganda we are, it's a little bit of an emergency. Is really borrowing just the only solution? Even if you're borrowing to utilize, remember there is a cost of that because you have to, the other factors you need to put in place for that infrastructure you've established to be of commercial of value. President Idi Amin, during this time, Uganda is known for so many infrastructures set up. At least most of the developments we talk about, whereby we were, as some experts say, if he continued to rule this country for more 10 years, it would be really a middle income, more even close to getting to the first world. But he really used the funds that he relied on were from within, empowering the locals to participate despite the records that during his time the inflation was there. But at least most of the developments we brag about as a country, he had a strong foundation for them. Let's take a look at China itself. We hardly know of China having gotten a loan from IMF or the World Bank. And it's just recent when the Communist Party took over and the entire course of China changed. How are we benchmarking from this? And we entirely put debt out because China knew that at the stage we are, borrowing could be dangerous because of the cost. Let's rely on the domestic resources. We have the population. It can happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it can happen. And referring to Idi Amin and then China, like you said, I think the reasons for their success was their anti-corruption policies.
Anti-corruption policies.
How much resources we lose to corruption?
A lot of money.
At least every year. Over 10 trillion,
exactly.
Apparently. And so, at least I know that if we were to check that, you check the corruption, you're able to save a lot of resources. So you'll find, for example, some of our public servants, your salary says 3 million, 2.5, 3 million. Yeah. But you look at the car they are driving, they've probably just started working. Yeah. You look at the car they are driving, you look at the schools the children are going to, you have a bill of about 20 million per term. Where is that money coming from? We've just seen how our GDP is not growing commensurate to our debt. And so where are all these resources going? Sometimes we've seen blatant cases of corruption, huge sums. And, there's a lot of impunity. Nothing is done. These people get away with it. And so if you were to set an example and say, stamp out corruption, if I get you, stealing, even if it is just a few shillings, firing squad like Amin, isn't that how he used to do it?
That's how he used to do it.
And so maybe that is why he was successful, because I know there is a lot of money that we lose in corruption every year. Every year. So it is possible. I think it is possible that we can actually have those resources within. And likewise, because as the going gets tough, then the tough has to get going. We see government, of course, after passing the AHA bill and all that, we see some support dwindling, the donors are going away. And so you have to deal with some of these things. You can't go on the international market and borrow like you used to. That's why you see the domestic debts increasing, because it is becoming more expensive for government to go out there and borrow. And so we see them now coming back with maybe a rationalization of the government entities to be able to save some money. If we were to rationalize, if we were to reduce some of these bills, like how many ministers do we have? Do we need all of them?
All of those ministers.
How many MPs, as always? How many districts,
Okay.
We are able to be more frugal, to relieve some resources, to be able to channel into our, development initiatives, to be able to develop this economy. But again, we do not have the will to be able to achieve that.
To implement.
To implement that, because even when we try to make sure that we squeeze out and try to generate those resources, trust me, they always disappear. And we don't know where the savings go. Yeah.
If I may ask, you mentioned that the districts we have, the ministers we have. So what could be the biggest issue here? Increased expenditure on public servants or corruption? Yeah.
Well, it is both, and this is the different ways I'm trying to show the different ways that we could be able to save some resources. Yeah. Because if we were to be strict on the corrupt, that means we are saving quite an amount of resources. And on the other hand, if we were to also reduce our administrative spending, if we were to reduce on like we've said, the districts, the members of parliament, the cabinet, the vehicles, the fleet that we have as government, then we are on the other hand also able to save some resources that we can put together and be able to run this economy.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we could also save those resources and, just like you said, try to maintain some of this infrastructure that we have set up. Because we set up roads, we set up, hospitals and etc. But we just end up on setting up. We do not have a budget for maintaining some of these.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then they'll deplete so fast.
And their value, product efficiency will be halted. Now, that brings me to the rationalization of agencies. Do you think it's going to answer some of the issues of the debt burden? Do you think it will be relevant?
I don't want to judge at this point, but if we are looking at saving about 900 billion.
They mentioned 1 trillion?
Yes.
Almost there.
Yeah. Almost 1 trillion.
Yeah.
960, 980, around there. Call it 1 trillion.
Can we brag about we've saved 1 trillion a year?
We could. 1 trillion is something.
It is something.
For the country. I mean, imagine if we were to get that 1 trillion and throw it back into the economy in terms of paying back the domestic arrears. How many businesses would be at least happy? It's not so much, but it is something.
Like
it would
0.5% for each.
Because, I mean, we are failing to raise that 215 billion. So 1 trillion would be something. But then again, the worry would be the utilization of these saved resources. Yeah. And that's why it gets back to, that citizens seem to have lost, faith, confidence.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah,
Trust me,
and so we are not looking so much forward that government is saving this, and so, but it is something. It would be something for the economy.
Absolutely. And lastly, we've been having an issue whereby some of the macroeconomic factors don't interplay with the household at household level. If you talk about there has been maybe inflation has reduced to this percentage, it never comes back to their citizens. They don't feel that.
Yeah, they because they have some of these should I say terms or the
economic terms
need to be brought down to the citizen, and that is why the ordinary citizen has developed apathy. I mean, you will go down there and talk about debt, and you'll say, by the public debt is shooting through the roof. They'll look at you and say, how does that concern me? So we need to, because they probably have delinked themselves from the state of affairs, they do not seem to see how this touches them directly. They do not know that the tax they are paying is what is going into that.
To that.
Yes.
But what can they do anyway, even if they find out?
They probably would rise up in many different ways. If
financial sit down strikes.
No, they would probably be pushed by tear gas and all that.
Yeah, strong military.
But it is about coming up in large numbers and putting government to task. Demanding from them, telling them, for example, how many maybe ordinary citizens are going to group themselves and come and engage with government and tell them, look here, over the last so many years, you promise us that you're prioritizing us, human capital development.
Yeah.
You're giving us, the biggest share of the budget. But we see it reducing. We don't see it translating.
Exactly. Yes.
Look here, Mr. Government, why are you doing this? But they don't. They don't seem to, connect this state of affairs to themselves. Yeah, as the tax increases, as they pay much more and more taxes, the taxes go to debt servicing. The share that will go to them is actually reducing, while debt servicing is going up, which now should concern them. And we rise up as citizens really to ask. So as we acquire the debt, which is not bad, how are we using it?
Using the debt.
Why can't the debt pay back itself?
So it should be a growing concern.
It should.
Amongst all the Ugandan citizens at household level.
It should, at whatever level. I think this is a conversation that we want to have with government at every level as citizens. Maybe that's the only way that government will be able to listen, especially our leaders. If the members of parliament, if your presidential candidates come, ask them the hard questions. Ask them, you want my vote, but this and this is happening. I don't see my life changing.
Of course, they're going to promise to make a difference.
And that is where...
And they're never going to make that difference.
Exactly. And that is where we go wrong as citizens. It is no wonder they say your leaders come from yourselves, from your society. So if they're able to fool you like that, and then you keep, entrusting them, then you will probably not realize the gains that you're looking out for. Poverty will continue to increase as they come and give you a kilo of sugar for a vote. They give you maybe a kilo of salt for your vote. Because if someone is able to buy you and they give you poor services.
They give you 20K and their votes, if somebody is able to pay you to vote them, then what do you expect what they're going to do in the office?
Exactly. And that does not only result into a disservice to ourselves, we are killing our future generations. We are killing them.
All right. Interesting, and it's been a pleasure to have you this morning. Yeah, my guest this morning has been Christine Bienjiro. He's the programs manager, Uganda Network, and we've been trying to break down matters to do with how do we sustain the debt that we're having in the country to foster economic growth and development to avoid the future generations from going into the massive economic turmoil we have experienced. Well, it's 6 minutes to the top of the hour. Thanks for being part of Smart Men's Business today's edition. And of course, heading into the weekend, let it be productive for you in terms of strategizing for the new week. A happy one till Monday. Good morning.